Step into the unknown with Serenity Valley Stories. Remember to like and subscribe, if you wish to hear more. And now our feature presentation, The Terror in the Hills. I never believed in monsters. Not the ones you hear about in fairy tales or whispered legends, not the creatures that people claim lurk in the shadows or roam the woods at night. That changed the evening I found myself alone in the dense forests of the Appalachian foothills, fighting for my life against something that should not exist. The day started like any other, a humid summer morning in the rural backcountry of Maryland, just a stone's throw from the Virginia border. I'd taken a few days off work to clear my head and enjoy some solitude. The world had become too noisy for me lately, too crowded with obligations, too many people demanding my attention. A weekend spent hiking and camping in the quiet hills seemed like the perfect antidote. I parked my truck near an old logging road, long abandoned and mostly overgrown, and started the hike up into the hills. The trail was little more than a faint path, barely visible among the ferns and underbrush, but I knew the area well enough. My family had owned a cabin out here for generations, though it had fallen into disrepair since my grandfather passed. No one had the heart to visit after that. Still, the land felt familiar, comforting in a way that only places steeped in memory can be. The sun hung high in the sky as I climbed, the trees casting dappled shadows across the forest floor. Birds chirped in the branches above, and the occasional rustle in the bushes suggested the presence of deer or smaller creatures. It was peaceful, exactly what I needed. By late afternoon, I'd reached a clearing near the summit, a perfect spot to set up camp. The view stretched out before me, a sea of green rolling hills with patches of farmland visible in the distance. I pitched my tent, gathered some firewood, and settled in for the evening, content with the world for the first time in weeks. As dusk fell, the forest came alive with the sounds of night. Crickets chirped in the undergrowth, and the distant hoot of an owl echoed through the trees. I sat by the fire, warming my hands and watching the flames dance, feeling the tension of everyday life melt away. Then, just as the last light of day faded from the sky, I heard it, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. It started as a low, guttural growl, almost like the rumble of distant thunder, but deeper, more menacing. I froze, listening intently, every nerve on edge. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by a rustling in the bushes just beyond the reach of the firelight. I stood up, my heart pounding. Probably just a bear, I muttered to myself, though I knew that was unlikely. Bears were rare in these parts, and I'd never heard one make a sound like that. Still, I grabbed the rifle I'd brought along, just in case, and kept my eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the fire. The growling stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. The forest, which had been so full of life moments before, now felt deathly still. Even the crickets had ceased their song. I strained to see into the shadows, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Suddenly, something moved. A massive shape emerged from the trees, stepping into the dim light cast by the fire. My heart nearly stopped. It was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen, a nightmare-given form. It stood on two legs, towering over me, at least 7 feet tall, with leathery wings folded against its back. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent yellow light, and its beak, yes, a beak, like some twisted hybrid of a bird and a dragon, snapped open and shut, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. I raised the rifle, hands trembling, and fired a shot. The bullet hit its mark, striking the creature in the shoulder, but it barely flinched. Instead, it let out a screech that pierced the night, a sound so loud and shrill it felt like knives driving into my skull. Panicking, I fired again, but the creature was already moving. It lunged at me with impossible speed, its claws raking the air as I dove to the side, barely avoiding a lethal strike. I scrambled to my feet and ran, abandoning my camp, my supplies, everything, in a desperate bid to escape. I could hear it behind me, crashing through the underbrush, those terrible wings unfurling with a sound like sails snapping in the wind. The ground shook with each step it took, and that screech, it was relentless, reverberating through the trees, making it impossible to think, impossible to do anything but run. I didn't know where I was going. The path I'd taken up the hill was lost in the chaos, and the darkness was all-encompassing now, broken only by the occasional flash of lightning in the distance, though there was no sign of a storm. The forest was a maze, the trees closing in around me, branches clawing at my clothes and face as I stumbled blindly through the night. Then, as I rounded a bend, my foot caught on a root, and I went down hard, pain exploding in my ankle. I tried to stand, but my leg buckled beneath me. I was trapped, helpless, my back against a large oak tree, and I could hear the creature closing in, its footsteps slowing as it approached, savoring the hunt. The creature's glowing eyes appeared first, followed by the rest of its monstrous form as it stepped into view. It was even more terrifying up close, every detail etched into my mind with horrifying clarity. The smell of sulfur and decay filled the air as it leaned in, that beak snapping inches from my face. I fumbled for my rifle, but it was gone, lost somewhere in the dark. I was defenseless, my heart hammering in my chest, and all I could do was stare into those terrible eyes, knowing that I was about to die. But then something strange happened. The creature hesitated, its head cocking to one side as if listening to something I couldn't hear. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, and then, without warning, the Snallygaster recoiled, its wings flaring out as it let out a screech of frustration. It stepped back, away from me, those glowing eyes narrowing as it stared into the darkness behind me. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe, as the creature seemed to wrestle with some unseen force. Finally, with one last angry screech, it turned and fled, vanishing into the night with a gust of wind from its wings. For several minutes, I sat there, too stunned to move, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It wasn't until the adrenaline began to fade that I realized the full extent of my injuries. My ankle was throbbing, likely sprained or worse, and my hands and arms were cut up from the fall. Blood was trickling down my face from a gash on my forehead where I'd hit a branch. But I was alive. Slowly, painfully, I dragged myself to my feet, leaning heavily on the tree for support. My first thought was to get back to the campsite, but I knew that was impossible. I was in no condition to make it back up the hill, especially not in the dark with that thing still out there. Instead, I decided to head downhill, toward the logging road where I'd parked my truck. It was a long shot, I wasn't even sure if I was heading in the right direction, but it was the only chance I had. I hobbled forward, every step a battle against the pain, the memory of those glowing eyes urging me on. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes, it was impossible to tell. The night seemed to stretch on forever, each shadow hiding the possibility of the creature's return. But eventually, I caught sight of something familiar, a break in the trees, the glint of metal in the moonlight. My truck. Relief flooded through me as I stumbled the last few feet, practically collapsing against the driver's side door. My hands shook so badly that it took several tries to get the key into the lock, but finally, I managed it and slid into the driver's seat. I didn't waste time checking my injuries or calming myself down. I just turned the key, and the engine roared to life, a sound more beautiful than any music I'd ever heard. I slammed the truck into gear and peeled out of there, the tires kicking up gravel as I sped down the old road, not caring if I wrecked as long as it got me away from that place. It wasn't until I reached the highway, the safety of civilization within sight, that I allowed myself to slow down. My hands were still trembling, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but I was alive, and the creature, whatever it was miles behind me. I pulled over to the side of the road, my body finally giving in to the exhaustion and pain. For a long time, I just sat there, staring out at the dark, empty highway, trying to process what had happened. No one would believe me if I told them. Hell, I wasn't sure I believed it myself. But I knew one thing for certain, there were things in those hills, things older and more dangerous than we could ever imagine. And I had come far too close to becoming another one of the legends that haunted the dark corners of this land. As I sat there, the weight of the night's events pressing down on me, I felt a chill run down my spine. The Snallygaster was real, and it was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. And as much as I wanted to forget, I knew that I never would. the terror in the hills would haunt my dreams for the rest of my life. Thank you for watching Serenity Valley Stories. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another scary tale. Share your thoughts in the comments below.